For decades, a war of interpretation has been waged in this region. In the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina, with numerous special interests, it is easy to overlook the simplicity of the truth, which is clear when you consider only the facts. In just over 100 years, Bosnia and Herzegovina and the city of Sarajevo have survived 2 world wars and the breakup of Yugoslavia. In 1878, at the Congress of Berlin, Bosnia and Herzegovina was one of the most important topics. It was handed over to the Habsburg monarchy as the Ottoman Empire was falling apart. Shortly after, Austrian troops invaded Bosnia, provoking strong resistance by the local population. During the period from 1878 until 1914, a process of national awakening was taking place in the South Slavic lands under Austrian rule. This led to a flood of conspiracies and individual acts of terror which aimed to defend the right to self-determination and destroy the Habsburg monarchy. The Sarajevo assassination, the killing of the heir apparent, was the trigger for declaring war. A direct, if unexpected, consequence was the creation of the first Yugoslavia, the kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, leaving the question of the other nations unresolved. Case Study 1914, the Sarajevo assassination. What Winston Churchill once described as the old world in its sunset had never been captured more brilliantly than at the funeral of King Edward VII in May 1910. This was the event of the distinguished Parade of Kings, when over 50 royal horsemen, an imperial cavalcade of emperors, kings, crown princes, archdukes, grand dukes, and princes, followed the late king's coffin through the streets of London. It was the end of the Europe of the kings and the beginning of the Europe of the dictators. The Habsburgs had ruled over Central Europe for more than 6 centuries. The Austrian Empire included 8 nations, 17 regions, 20 parliamentary bodies, and a variety of cultures and languages. After a period of internal turmoil, Emperor Franz Joseph had saved the empire by suggesting that Austria and Hungary become separate sovereign states under one ruler. The Austro-Hungarian Empire encompassed Croatia and much of today's Slovenia, where the majority of the population was Roman Catholic. Serbia was not part of the empire. After the awakening of national consciousness and the revolt against the Turks, Serbia had become an independent kingdom in the Balkans in 1882. The majority of its population was Orthodox Christian. Bosnia was under Turkish sovereignty. At the Congress of Berlin in 1878, it was decided that Bosnia should be placed under Austro-Hungarian rule. Austro-Hungarian troops entered Bosnia on the 29th of July, 1878.
U predvečerje rata 1914. bunila se uznemirena svijest čitavog omladinskog pokoljenja u svim južnoslovenskim zemljama u Austrijskom carstvu.
This was an era of national awakening of all the nations from the borders of Serbia to the Adriatic coast, inspired by 19th century Europe and now transplanted to the Balkans. A new revolutionary generation was created, one whose common goal was the destruction of the Habsburg monarchy. By denying the right to self-determination, the Habsburg monarchy faced a revival of tyrannicide and the outbreak of individual terrorism.
Kao reakcija na aneksiju, niču tajna omladinska udruženja umrežena tajnim kanalima po Bosni i Hercegovini. Jedno od njih zvalo se Mlada Bosna. Njihova ideja permanentne pobune i prava na ubistvo tiranina začeta je prije svega pod uticajem folklorne filozofije.
The patriarchal way of life preserved the ancient idea, expressed in the epic poetry of the Kosovo cycle, that the killing of a foreign ruler, a tyrant, was one of the noblest goals of life.
U kratkom periodu svoje političke aktivnosti Mladobosanci su tražili da se po revolucionarnom uništenju Austro-Ugarske monarhije napravi federalno rješenje buduće južnoslovenske države. Velikosrbi i Velikohrvati htjeli su čisto srpske ili čisto hrvatske provincije. Za Srbe u Srbiji jugoslovenstvo je bilo isto što i velikosrpstvo, te nisu htjeli program jednakosti svih naroda.
The Sarajevo assassination was the sixth of its kind on Croatian and Bosnian soil. Even if the world had failed to catch fire, supposedly because blood was shed in Sarajevo, young people would have rebelled with weapons in hand, not out of arrogance, but out of desperation over the colonial position of the Yugoslav peoples.
Politička ubistva bila su česta pojava kroz istoriju. Neka su bila djelo anarhista. Neka su bila ubistva tiranina, što je bilo tradicionalno oružje bespomoćnih protiv tlačitelja. Kada je 28. juna 1914. bosanski student Gavrilo Princip u Sarajevu ubio nadvojvodu Franca Ferdinanda, budućeg nasljednika Habsburškog prijestola, počinio je atentat koji je po svojim posljedicama bio bez presedana. Pokrenuo je rat interpretacija koji traje do danas. Ovaj atentat mogli bismo nazvati savršenim ubistvom, jer se nikada sa sigurnošću neće moći utvrditi da li je i ko je stajao iza njega.
Eventually, Vienna began to realize that the political and cultural unification of Yugoslavs was undoubtedly becoming dangerous for Habsburg legitimist interests. As the dominant participant in the unification efforts, Serbia was to be subordinated to Austrian interests. This concept was demonstrated in the annexation of Bosnia in 1908, and especially after the Balkan Wars of 1912 to 1913. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, ordered military maneuvers to be held around Sarajevo and decided he would attend them. This was intended to be a demonstration of military strength. Ferdinand must have known that the country was ripe for rebellion and that almost every schoolboy and student belonged to some revolutionary organization. There were about a dozen plots in progress against the Habsburgs in collusion with secret societies in Dalmatia, Croatia, and Serbia. An association was founded in Belgrade at a meeting in the town hall called National Defense, whose goal was to secretly resist Austrian imperialism. Within a month, 5,000 volunteers were ready to cross over the border to Bosnia to fight against Austria. One of the members of Young Bosnia clipped a newspaper article announcing Franz Ferdinand's visit to Bosnia and mailed it from Sarajevo to Nedeljko Čabrinović, addressed to Zlatna Morina Bar, Belgrade. Čabrinović showed the article to Princip, and they decided to return to Sarajevo and kill Ferdinand. The 20-year-old Nedeljko Čabrinović had different political beliefs from his father. He participated in strikes and read anarchist literature. He left school and went from job to job, working as a locksmith and a typographer. He met Gavrilo Princip in 1912 and was working in a printing shop in Belgrade when he received the letter about Ferdinand's visit to Sarajevo. Gavrilo Princip was 19 at the time. His family were farmers who owned 4 acres of land in Herzegovina. At 13, he had gone to Sarajevo and enrolled in a merchant school. But he soon turned his back on trade for literature and poetry. He was expelled from the school and had his scholarship revoked for having participated in a demonstration. In 1912, he went to Belgrade, where he dabbled in literature and politics. He was a voracious reader. To many students in those years, reading became a passion that awoke revolutionary fervor, encouraging criticism of the existing conditions and the conventional wisdom. Princip did not serve in the Balkan Wars of 1912 and 1913. He had volunteered and was sent to a training center in southern Serbia, but he could not endure the strenuous drill and was discharged. He overheard one soldier calling him "scrap." He was deeply unhappy about not being able to prove himself a hero, saying, "We should either die in life or live in death." The future assassins needed weapons to execute their plan. They met a Bosnian refugee, Ciganovic, who offered to help them. He was a member of a secret organization called the Black Hand, whose name implied using terror for political purposes. The Black Hand was founded in 1911 in Serbia with the aim of uniting all Serbs in one state freed from foreign domination, in this case from Austrian rule. The organization was formed by a group of officers who killed the Serbian King Alexander and Queen Draga, replacing the Obrenović dynasty with the Karađorđević dynasty. The Karađorđević family, however, did not participate in the conspiracy. The leader of the Black Hand, Dragutin Dimitrijević Apis, was constantly at odds with the civilian authorities as he wanted to bring the country under military rule. The Black Hand sought war with Austria. Apis heard of Danilo Ilić and the future assassins through Vladimir Gacinovic, one of young Bosnia's inspirers and ideologues, who lived in Lausanne and was very influential with young people, especially in Bosnia. Ilić's true activity was political agitation. He had contacts in Bosnia, links with the Black Hand in Serbia, and connections in the community in exile in Switzerland. Acting on Apis's orders, Ciganovic got in touch with Čabrinović, Princip, and Grabej, and put them in touch with Major Tankosić, who was a member of the Black Hand. Archduke Franz Ferdinand arrived in Sarajevo, visited the troops, and attended the maneuvers. The night before the assassination, Ferdinand and Sophie spent the night at the Ilija resort near Sarajevo. In the evening, they held a dinner party, attended by more than 40 Sarajevo dignitaries. First dish was potage régence, a cream soup made of rice and fish, followed by soufflé délicieux and lanquette de truite à la gelée, trout from the source of the river Bosna. The main course consisted of chicken, lamb and beef, different salads and asparagus, compote, cold sherbet with fruit juice, and liqueur. The dinner ended with pineapple cream and burning brandy, cheeses, ice creams, and candies.
Ferdinand je malo prije nego što će umrijeti izrazio zadovoljstvo što je ubio svog 3000. jelena.
Meanwhile, Princip, Čabrinović, and Grabej arrived in Sarajevo through illegal channels, avoiding Serbian and Austrian patrols. But the secret route, organized by Major Tankosić, did not go unnoticed. Many Serbian villagers who helped them were later arrested by the Austrians, imprisoned, and executed. It was a miracle their journey ended successfully, because they were extremely careless. At one railway station, Ilić was supposed to take a package which the Black Hand had sent from Belgrade, but he panicked and did not appear at the appointed time. So a sugar box containing bombs lay for hours in the waiting room, covered by a coat. A stray cat even slept on it. Ilić finally pulled himself together and brought the bombs home, hiding them under the couch in his room.
Sarajevski atentat pokazuje da ljudska volja može sve, ali I da se sve događa slučajno.
It's hard to believe that Apis thought the conspirators would succeed in their plan, because he would have learnt from his officers that Princip was quite a good shot, but that the others couldn't even hit a wall. They gave them a map of Bosnia, 150 dinars, 4 Browning pistols, 6 grenades which were almost impossible to throw in a crowd, and hydrocyanic acid to commit suicide after the assassination. But it turned out that the acid did not work. They probably, in fact, gave them plain water, which they would not have done if they had believed the conspirators had serious intentions. The Black Hand and the young Bosnians had different motives for killing Ferdinand. The young Bosnians wanted to destroy Austro-Hungary and live in an idyllic South Slav federation. Apis and the Black Hand wanted a greater Serbia free of foreign domination. Gavrilo Princip did not understand that his revolutionary ideas were actually being manipulated. The Serbian government learned that some weapons had crossed the border, but they did not know what the weapons were intended for. They did not want any trouble right after the end of the Balkan War, with all their internal problems with the military leadership. And they did not know how exactly they should warn Franz Ferdinand, who had received many unspecific warnings before his visit to Sarajevo. 3 years later, the Serbian government sentenced Apis to death after a mysterious trial in Thessaloniki, about which almost nothing is known except that Apis's sentence was in fact connected with his role in the Sarajevo assassination. Shortly before the assassination, members of the Black Hand Council voted to cancel the plan, but it was already too late to recall the assassins. It was clear that Princip was determined to go through with it, regardless of the warnings and orders from Belgrade. The 28th of June, 8 a.m. If the main organizer, Danilo Ilić, had hesitated a few days before, on the 28th of June, he nevertheless decided that the assassination should be carried out. He brought 3 new conspirators into the group and gave them revolvers, although 2 of them had never fired a shot. Ilić went to Vlajnic's confectionery shop to meet Grabej and Čabrinović. Nedeljko Čabrinović left his house with a heavy heart. He had had an argument with his father because the old Čabrinović wanted to put up an Austrian flag in honor of Franz Ferdinand's arrival. When they questioned him later, he said, "I gave my mother the pocket knife and watch that my father gave me 3 years ago." At the hearing, he said, "Then I ran off and wept bitterly for 10 or 15 minutes because I felt sorry for my sisters." With his last few pennies, he bought a bouquet of flowers and sent it to a girl called Jela Uljarević. At 8:15, Čabrinović was in Vlajnic's confectionery shop, where he found Trifko Grabej and Danilo Ilić. Grabej asked him if Princip had told him where to stand, to which Čabrinović replied that he knew his position. Then he ate 3 cakes. When Princip arrived, they went to the back room, where Princip gave him a bomb and the poison wrapped in paper. Danilo Ilić ordered the conspirators to take their positions on the road by the riverbank. From the confectionery shop, Čabrinović headed down Apel Quay, where he met his friend Toma Vucinović. He went with him to the photographer Josef Schrei in the Circus Square. Čabrinović said in court that he had thought he should leave to posterity a photograph taken on that very day. Danilo Ilić took Trifko Grabej back to his place to give him a gun and a bomb. Gavrilo Princip was waiting from 9 a.m. on the Apel Quay with a gun and a bomb under his waist. Vaso Čubrilović and Cvetko Popović were also in position. Archduke Franz Ferdinand and Sophie arrived in Sarajevo on a train at 9:28. Although the Koteks, Sophie's family, were one of the oldest aristocratic families in Bohemia, under the Habsburgs family law, they were considered commoners. According to her title, Sophie could not sit next to her husband in the royal carriage, in the royal box at the opera, nor could she be buried in the Habsburg family tomb. But outside Austria, in the countries under their military rule, things were different. So, on this beautiful summer day in Sarajevo, the Duchess of Hohenberg would finally receive all the honors as wife of the heir apparent. The armed assassins walked along the bank for more than an hour without the police noticing them. Although warnings had come from several different sources about what could happen in Sarajevo, security was poorly organized. Ferdinand and Sophie were riding in an open carriage to the town hall. When the 6-car imperial motorcade passed an ambush of assassins, 4 of them did nothing. The first one was Mehmed Mehmedbasic, a 27-year-old carpenter who had a bomb. When the imperial motorcade passed him, he did nothing. A police officer was standing nearby, and Mehmedbasic feared that a failed attempt could spoil the other's chances. He was the only assassin who managed to escape after the assassination. The main organizer of the plot, 24-year-old Danilo Ilić, had no weapons. After the trial, Ilić was executed. Vaso Čubrilović, a 17-year-old student, carried a gun. Ilić had recruited him at the last moment. He also didn't act, fearing he would accidentally hit the Duchess Sophie. According to Austrian law, there was no death penalty for juvenile offenders, so he was sentenced to 16 years in prison. Cvetko Popović, an 18-year-old student, tried nothing, claiming he didn't see the car because he was short-sighted. He served 13 years in prison. Trifko Grabej, a 19-year-old Bosnian, had studied in Belgrade, where he had befriended Princip. He also didn't act. At the trial, he said he was afraid he would hurt women or children standing nearby. He died in prison. Nedeljko Čabrinović, just to make sure he would hit Franz Ferdinand's car, asked a detective who was watching the imperial motorcade instead of the audience, "Which one is His Majesty's car?" To which the excited detective replied, "The third one." At that moment, Čabrinović pulled out a bomb from under his waist, struck the fuse against a lamppost, and hurled it in the direction of the Archduke's green feathered hat. But the bomb did not go off at that point, exploding instead right in front of the next car and injuring more than a dozen people. Čabrinović swallowed the poison and jumped over the fence into the river Miljacka. The poison did not work, and the police caught him. Princip had an excellent opportunity to shoot when the Archduke's car stopped after Čabrinovic's bomb. At the first hearing, he said, "I ran and wondered who it was that did it, because I had already decided to do it myself. In the excitement, I failed to see the heir, I just saw them quickly driving off." When he heard that the attempt had failed, he thought about where to stand, having read in Bosanska Pošta where the motorcade would go. He paused at the corner of Apel Quay and Franz Joseph Street near Maurice Schiller's store. When the imperial car stopped in front of the town hall, the mayor of Sarajevo warmly welcomed Franz Ferdinand. "Our hearts are full of joy on the occasion of the most gracious visit with which your highnesses have deigned to honor the capital of our land." "Mr. Mayor," interrupted the Archduke, "what is the use of your speech? I come to Sarajevo on a friendly visit, and someone throws a bomb at me. This is outrageous." The Archduke's anger should have been directed at the governor of Bosnia, Oskar Poćorek, who failed to take appropriate security measures. Despite the warnings, there were only 120 police officers on duty that day.
Nešto kasnije, oko 10 sati, tokom prijema u vijećnici, Ferdinand je pitao Počoreka da li vjeruje da će neko na njih baciti bombu dok budu odlazili iz vijećnice. A Počorek je na nevjerovatno pitanje Franca Ferdinanda odgovorio da je siguran da drugog napada neće biti. Bilo bi najnormalnije da su Franc Ferdinand i Sofija ostali u vijećnici dok ne dođe dovoljan broj vojnika, dio od onih 70.000 stacioniranih u blizini grada, i da se oni rasporede po ulicama kao obezbjeđenje.
Počorek's behavior could be explained only if he had received assurances that if something were to happen to Ferdinand, there would be no investigation. According to the original plan, the Archduke was supposed to return to Appel Quay and turn into Franz Joseph Street, but in the hall he changed the plan. They decided to listen to the Duchess's suggestion and head straight for Appel Quay to the military hospital to visit one of the officers wounded by the bomb. The main objective of the new plan was to thwart any conspirators who might be lurking in the crowd. No one from the Archduke's entourage or from the police informed the drivers about the change of plan, and no one said there was no need to take a turn into Franz Joseph Street. Count Harrach, an Austrian general, stood on the left footboard of the royal car with his sword drawn, ready to protect Ferdinand and Sophie with his life. When the first car reached the bridge, it took a right turn and went into a side street. The Archduke's driver followed the original plan and turned into Franz Joseph Street. When Počorek realized the mistake, he ordered the driver to stop and go back. The confused driver hit the brakes and began backing up. He stopped at the corner right in front of Gavrilo Princip. Princip shot. When he saw the Archduke bend, he turned the gun on Počorek. He would have killed him if Sophie hadn't thrown herself in her final act of her great love, grabbing Ferdinand and getting directly in the line of fire of the second bullet. She was already dead when Ferdinand muttered, "Sophie, Sophie, live for our children." 45 minutes later, Princip was telling Judge Pfeffer, "When I stopped on the corner of the Latin Bridge near Schiller's store, I heard the crowd cheering, 'Long live.' After a moment, the first car appeared, and I tried hard to see the heir apparent, whom I knew from the newspapers. When the second car arrived, I saw a lady and a green general's hat, and I recognized the heir apparent. I was standing 2 or 3 feet from Schiller's store at point C when the automobile came from the town hall, that is, from point A. It turned as if they wanted to go into Franz Joseph Street toward point D. But at point B, at maybe 5 paces, the automobile stopped. At first, I intended to throw the bomb, but because the bomb was screwed closed, it would be hard for me to open. I drew the revolver and raised it against the automobile without aiming. I even turned my head as I shot. I fired 2 shots, one after the other. I believe I fired twice, perhaps more, but I'm not sure because I was very excited. This is also why I did not want to throw the bomb, because I didn't have the strength to do it. Then people started beating me. Someone took my gun and the bomb fell out. Princip said at his hearing that he had managed to put the poison into his mouth while the officers were beating him. The assassination was full of amazing coincidences, amateurishly organized, almost impossible to carry out. Everything went wrong, and the attempt failed several times, until the imperial motorcade stumbled upon Gavrilo as if they had been looking for him in all of Sarajevo.
Tog suđenja bio je skriven od javnosti. Zvanični izvještaji slati su u Beč i tamo nestajali. Tek nakon nekoliko godina kopije izvještaja nađene su u Sarajevu. To je vjerovatno razlog zašto danas u svijetu postoji mnogo pogrešnih predstava o ovoj zavjeri.
All the conspirators were arrested. The trial was held in the divisional court inside the military prison in Sarajevo. The state prosecutor charged 22 individuals with intending to forcibly alter the boundaries of the Austro-Hungarian monarchy, namely to secede Bosnia and Herzegovina from the monarchy and annex it to the Kingdom of Serbia, as well as with ambush assassination. 80 people were called as witnesses, and a lot of evidence material was read at the trial. In his courageous defense of the conspirators, Rudolf Zisler, a young attorney and well-known socialist from Sarajevo, argued that the South Slavs living within the borders of the Habsburg monarchy had a right to self-determination, and that the defendants were not guilty of treason due to the legal status of Bosnia and Herzegovina. He cited the decisions of the Berlin Congress, based on which Austro-Hungary had won the right only to occupy Bosnia and Herzegovina, but not the right to annex it, because sovereignty was still in the hands of the Sultan, the holder of state power in Turkey. The assassins insisted that it was their idea to carry out the assassination, that no one from Belgrade had talked them into it, and that the Komitas only helped them get the weapons and cross the border. Princip said, "I am a South Slav nationalist, aiming for the unification of all South Slavs, and I do not care into what form of state as long as it is free from Austria." Asked by the judge how they intended to achieve this political unification of the South Slavs, Princip replied, "At this moment, we imagined a European war in which Serbia and Yugoslavia would gain such strength that it could break away from Austria. These are the ideas of idealistic youths. There are many others who think differently."
Dok je trajalo suđenje Principu i drugovima, jedna po jedna tajna organizacija mladobosanaca je bila otkrivana. Razotkrivene su i tajne omladinske organizacije u Sloveniji i Dalmaciji koje su održavale veze sa mladobosancima.
The trial ended on the 23rd of October, 1914. The verdict was read out 5 days later. The conspirators who were of age were sentenced to death. Others, including Princip, were sentenced to long imprisonment. Some survived the war and were later released. Princip died in prison of tuberculosis.
Sarajevski atentat je sa tehničke strane bio jedan od onih atentata modernog doba koji su izvršeni do kraja amaterski. Uprkos velikom broju zavjerenika, uprkos njihovoj visoko razvijenoj svijesti, kao i hladnokrvnosti i snalažljivosti Gavrila Principa u najodlučnijem trenutku dana posle Čabrinovićevog promašaja, činjenica što je Franz Ferdinand platio glavom plod je pukog slučaja. To je bila prava zasjeda bosanskih hajduka, tih drevnih agrarnih terorista. Atentat na Franca Ferdinanda izvršen je po uzoru na Principove pretke Čeke, koji su i dobili to ime zato što su sačekivali neprijatelja u zasjedi i tukli ga pravo u glavu.
The respect that had not been shown to the Archduke and Duchess during their life was also denied in death. To reduce public expressions of compassion for Ferdinand and his wife, Ferdinand's chamberlain ordered their caskets to be transferred at night and buried separately. Franz Ferdinand's casket was covered with the Habsburg flag, a two-headed black eagle about 1,000 years old. Princip, still underage, the son of poor Herzegovinian farmers, had taken the eagle down from the sky with his revolver. The assassin had a strange name, combining the names of a prince and an archangel. Princip was taken to Theresienstadt, an old fort north of Prague turned into a military prison. The following day, riots broke out. There were mass arrests, Serb stores were destroyed. Hundreds of school children and students were thrown into jail, along with the plotters' families, prominent Serbs, teachers, and priests. It is said that Pocherek wanted to appease the authorities with these riots so they wouldn't punish him for failing to protect Ferdinand, and indeed, he was promoted. Franz Ferdinand's marriage to a commoner had caused the emperor to worry about the future heir to the throne, and he coldly, almost happily, received the devastating news, saying, "A higher power has re-established the order which I, alas, could not preserve." None of the leading Habsburg politicians thought for one moment that the Serbian government was to blame. This belief was confirmed on the 14th of July, 1914, in a report by the legal counselor to the Foreign Ministry, Wiesner, who was sent to Sarajevo to lead the investigation. There is nothing to prove, nor is there any reason to assume that the Serbian government knew about the assassination or that it incited it or provided weapons. The events following the assassination in July and early August 1914 were a classic example of the law of connected vessels. In other words, it was an alliance mechanism, through old agreements, that drew the world's greatest nations into war with each other. Franz Ferdinand had believed that war against Serbia was the only way for the monarchy, even though it could lead to a European war. The Sarajevo assassination served as an excuse for Viennese court diplomacy to carry out a planned action which had been prepared ever since Bosnia and Herzegovina was annexed in 1908. Austria-Hungary received assurances from Germany that it would stand beside them if the unthinkable was to happen, and Russia declared war. In fact, Germany not only agreed to, but also encouraged the war option. This was a compound connection of the Austro-Hungarian resolve to extend its influence in the Balkans and the German plan to expand its influence in the East, in the lands of the dying Ottoman Empire. Austria accused Serbia of inciting the plotters to kill Franz Ferdinand and issued an ultimatum with demands so unacceptable that Serbia was certain to refuse. And when it became clear that Russia would support Serbia, the Serbian Prime Minister refused the key points of the 48-hour ultimatum: Austria's involvement in the local judiciary and police. Unsatisfied with the response, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia on the 28th of July, 1914. Russia, linked to Serbia by treaty, announced the mobilization of its vast army in Serbia's defense. Germany, Austria-Hungary's ally by treaty, saw the Russian mobilization as an act of war against Austria-Hungary, and after a scant warning, declared war on Russia on the 1st of August. France, linked to Russia by treaty, thus found itself at war with Germany, and consequently, after Germany's declaration of war on the 3rd of August, with Austria-Hungary. Germany rapidly invaded neutral Belgium so it could reach Paris by the shortest route. Britain, France's ally by a very loose treaty according to which it had a moral obligation to defend it, declared war on Germany on August the 4th. By the provisions of a 75-year-old treaty, they were obligated to defend neutral Belgium after the German invasion of Belgium on the 4th of August. Like France, Britain entered the war with Austria-Hungary by default agreement. With Britain's entry into the war, its colonies and dominions, including Australia, Canada, India, New Zealand, and the Union of South Africa, offered military and financial assistance. The President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, announced a program of absolute neutrality, and this official position would last until 1917, when Germany seriously threatened the American merchant marine with its submarines, forcing the US finally to enter the war on the 6th of April 1917. Japan, according to its military agreement with Britain, declared war on Germany on the 23rd of August 1914. 2 days later, Austria-Hungary responded with a declaration of war on Japan. Italy, although a German and Austria-Hungarian ally, managed to avoid entering the fray, citing a clause which allowed her to avoid any obligation to the two countries. In short, Italy would have to defend Germany and Austria-Hungary only in the case of a defensive war. Claiming that their actions were offensive, it declared neutrality. The following year, in May 1915, Italy finally entered the war on the side of the Allies against its two former allies. The Great War took the lives of approximately 10 million soldiers and roughly 7 million civilians. By late 1918, more than one generation of European sons were left lying in the trenches. After the most destructive 4-year-long war in human history, and in the midst of chaos, uncertainty, and euphoria, the kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes, later known as Yugoslavia, was established. The kingdom included the territories of Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, and Macedonia. France, a longtime Serbian ally, took upon itself to persuade other Western powers to accept Yugoslavia's unification, recognizing the Kingdom of Serbs, Croats, and Slovenes at the Versailles Conference in 1919. The Yugoslavs founded their country on the basis of the self-determination of 3 nations, with the difficult task of harmonizing different traditions, cultures, and legal and economic systems. Whether they were Orthodox Christians, Muslims, or Catholics, they would all be part of the Yugoslav kingdom, with the Serbian king as sovereign. There was no open opposition, although there were differences of opinion about the future system of the newly formed kingdom. This country, later to be renamed the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, capitulated in 1941 after it was invaded by Nazi Germany and the territory of the Kingdom of Yugoslavia was occupied and divided. Bosnia was given to the independent state of Croatia, a newly created Nazi puppet state. World War II gave rise to an anti-fascist and national liberation movement against the German and Italian troops, as well as against the local Ustasha and Chetnik units. Bosnia and Herzegovina was the site of the most important war offensives, which is how in 1943, under Tito's leadership, the Second Yugoslavia was created. The city of Sarajevo had a strong illegal resistance movement. The victory of the Allies, the National Liberation Movement, and partisan liberation of Sarajevo and other cities were the foundation of Yugoslavia, with a socialist constitution which included Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbia, Montenegro, Macedonia, and 2 autonomous provinces, Kosovo and Vojvodina. Brotherhood and unity of nations and nationalities was one of the achievements of the anti-fascist and national liberation struggle. Being Yugoslav was the primary identity. Ethnic and religious affiliations were not commonly practiced or manifest. Tito was a beloved and undisputed ruler until his death in 1980, when the process of Yugoslavia's disintegration began. There were many causes which had been built up over the years in the seemingly blissful Yugoslavia, which led to a strategically planned implosion after Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Macedonia declared independence, with a series of wars ending with the Kosovo conflict. Slobodan Milosevic and his regime, strongly supported by the Yugoslav People's Army, led the process of disintegration through 4 wars that provoked defensive wars in the territories under attack. The disintegration and division of Bosnia and Herzegovina was a joint effort by the Milosevic regime in Serbia and Tudjman's regime in Croatia. Ethnic cleansing was a goal rather than a means of warfare. In its strategy to transform every citizen into an ethnic national unit, this war involved a level of psychological warfare. Those who had not already been transformed were to be weaned from living together and being citizens, individuals, persons, and taught to be only one of 3 clearly divided ethnic groups, which the politicians could easily manipulate. Slobodan Milosevic lost 4 wars, failed to achieve the Greater Serbia, and lost Kosovo in 1999. But with the peace agreement in Dayton, the international community, in its attempt to try to stop the war, incorporated a systematic era into Dayton and post-Dayton Bosnia and Herzegovina. In the post-Dayton Bosnia, citizens have been exhausted and frustrated by open-ended war for 18 years because the status of the country is still not determined. Their livelihood is threatened by the vast plundering of the common goods and the fraudulent ruling oligarchies of the 3 ethnic groups, broken and frozen with fear of one another. In February 2014, a social uprising broke out, which returned the identity of citizen to those who do not accept an identity based solely on ethno-religious affiliation, but instead identify themselves as a threatened class.